Okay, we're finally going to get started. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm so excited to be here with Mamo Blue. And we're going to be speaking about this amazing book, The Rest of You. You can pick up a book right after the talk at the till and get it signed. Thank you so much. And today is the official UK publishing date. So that's super exciting. And thank you so much for coming all the way to Edinburgh to see us from London.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're going to jump straight in. And anyone who doesn't know, could you give us a wee brief of the book without any spoilers?
Okay. I would love to just read the back, but I should really get better at summarising what this novel is about. So, this is a novel about a young woman called Whitney. She is a massage therapist, and it kind of opens with her dancing in a club, surrounded by people, feeling completely alone. She has a kind of incident with an ex, and it triggers a kind of sense memory of something that happened when she was younger. She doesn't quite know what it is, and so we kind of follow her. She lives in London, kind of interacting with friends and family, trying to uncover what this memory is that's having a kind of bigger impact on her. And then it has a dual timeline with that's set in Ghana in the mid 90s. And there's three women. Two of them are her aunties, Whitney's aunties, and one is a house help. They are raising Whitney, who is a toddler at the time, and there's something that happens that has an impact on what's happening to her now in present day. And so we kind of are watching these two things take place.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really, really good. I got to read it this at the beginning of this month and recommended it to everybody and then realized that they couldn't buy it. So
it's all pre-orders.
Yeah, it's all pre-orders. So the friends that I got to watch now, you can buy it, and I really recommend that you do. But we're going to start off with a wee reading, if that's okay.
Yes. So I will read from the opening of the book. No context. Yeah. So this is Whitney. Okay. The second time you lost yourself, you were in the tuck shop, but you were no longer a child, no longer scraping coins together for a crunchy bar or stealing Chewits from a friend. You were out on a Saturday night in a club named after a shared childhood sanctuary, promising sweetness in name only, as music encased you in that place, a sultry, regular vibration that had a way of soothing all of life's ailments. Blue lights lit up the dance floor, and the gimmick of the club meant an assortment of penny sweets in bowls scattered across the gleaming limestone bar. Everyone scrunched up their noses at their first sight of that candy, but bottomless glasses of clear and brown liquids that passed across that same bar hours later led to empty bowls, the sweets having disappeared into drunken mouths and into the pockets of people riding highs to the moon. You rarely took part in the pill-popping festivities, but this night was different. When midnight hit, you had officially turned 30, joined by a group of friendly strangers jump dancing around you as Stevie Wonder's Happy Birthday spun loudly under the DJ's careful fingers. You had danced for what felt like hours, feeling elated and a little tipsy from the pearl you had placed under your now tingling tongue, though it had long since dissolved. Fingers dragged themselves in multitudes in front of your eyes as the buzz took hold and you swayed to the rhythm, hoping you weren't missing it in inebriation. You looked to your kin for validation, your best friend and flatmate Chantel, holding on to both your hands, dancing with you, laughing, swinging with you to the same rhythm, even if it differed from everyone else's. She really was a ride or die, you remember thinking, or some approximation of that thought, as the drugs slipped into phase 2, and suddenly all you could think about was the sensation of fingertips against each other and on skin. My Gloria always said that you held your feelings in other people's touch. It was only when you became a masseuse and began to feel the strength of skin on skin and all the things you could communicate to strangers without words that you started to understand her meaning. You wondered often if one or both of your parents had been the same way. Okay, I'll stop there.
Thank you. So you told me downstairs that you were able to write the parts set in London with Whitney over lockdown, but went back to Ghana physically to write the dual timeline, the flashbacks. Can you tell me, like, how did that research trip come about, and what was it like to travel through Ghana?
I was in lockdown, and this idea just came to me, and it was like drawing blood from a stone because we weren't going anywhere, and I realised a lot of my writing happens when I'm on the move, and I wasn't going anywhere, so it was kind of like, oh, what is this story? and I managed to get some funding to actually travel to Ghana and to aid my research. And I had initially planned for the book to just be the London parts and just Whitney's experience. And then like another book was maybe going to explore Ghana and something else. But then when I went there and I had a conversation with my agent, and we realised, oh no, it's the same book. And as soon as I went, I hadn't been since I was a teenager, and I was like deeply ashamed of that fact. But actually, we didn't go when I was younger. And my mum lined up all these like conversations with aunties and uncles, everyone that was of her generation who had kind of migrated in the 80s and the 90s. And I wanted to speak to them to find out what reasons did they leave, why did they come back, what was happening at the time. And they were just all so open and very like willing to share, which growing up had not been my experience. And anyone who is kind of a part of the diaspora of any kind, or just a different generation, that our parents or our guardians, like there's some stuff that happened to them before we were born that you might never find out about until you're much older. And it just filled in a lot of gaps for me, but they were so open, and I spent 2 years writing this London bit. I went to Ghana and I wrote the second part of the book in like a month. It was crazy. But it just, I don't know, there was something about how open everyone was, and I was just very much like I'm a tourist in this country, and everyone was just really kind, and I don't know, it made a really big difference, I think.
Feeling like a tourist, I feel like that is very much like a diasporic experience. Like it feels like you are excavating your history, filling in these gaps. You kind of know a little bit, and that those feelings of shame, I think other people can definitely relate. To make you feel any better, I'm Nigerian and I've not been back since I was 10, so
that doesn't make me feel better.
I'm no better than like the tourist that tells me I've been to Lagos at one time. But what did it feel like to speak to people a generation above you, and to like kind of, did you feel like on the same level as adults? Like how how did it feel to maybe hear about lessons learned that you might have been experiencing in adulthood?
It was so I had the like safe structure of, I'm writing a book, and because I've written one before, they were like, oh yeah. You're legitimized a little bit, so okay. So I think partly that was why they were so open, but also, so it was like talking. It was still like talking to my aunties and my uncle. It wasn't, but they were just a bit. They were speaking to me more on a level, I would say, of like, and they would just let me ask them any kind of questions. They were very open, and my mum specifically, she was the first kind of conversation I had. It was a very big conversation, and it really rocked my world a bit when we initially had it, but actually it was the thing that opened the doors to all these other conversations I later had, because she was so open, she was so honest, and again there were lots of things I didn't know, that when you're the child, you are kind of just, you're in your own world and you're thinking about your world, their world should revolve around me. Why doesn't it? And you don't think of them as separate people who have their own lives. And I think that was kind of what I wanted to infuse into the book a bit more, is to look at it from the other perspective.
That's so interesting. It sounds really healing, or like a full circle moment to like have that experience with your mom and be able to like see her as a fully fledged human being. That's such a weird transition, like in adulthood, where you're like, you're not infallible, like you are an adult that makes mistakes and can mess up sometimes, or has gone through the same thing as me. In the book I found it like quite haunting, these like flashbacks and this dual timeline, like it made me think about generational trauma, or just things that follow us, like in bloodlines and across continents. This idea of traveling, like from Ghana to the UK, and how lessons are passed down through generations. How did you allow Whitney to go through that journey? How did you not start from a place of she knows it all? And like what kind of, talk about the writing the journey for her in the book.
I really love a kind of complicated character who's quite flawed, but has redeeming qualities. So I want to make that clear. I feel like we talked about this. Like there are some books that you've got a flawed character and you just don't like them, and that's okay also. But that wasn't what I was going for here. I wanted her to just seem like she could be your friend. She could just be someone that you know, but she's going through something that's quite transformative. She doesn't really understand what's happening. These memories, and what happens when you have these gaps in your life? You are going to have those gaps in your personhood as well. You're going to have those gaps in how you interact with people presently, and so I wanted to kind of just interrogate it a bit more. And I did say it to you downstairs. And one day I will stop telling people this, but I used to be a psychotherapist.
It's really
This
important
explains
to say.
why explains the way that I think many years ago. And so part of that is, and we talked about that healing thing. I wanted to learn what happens after the trauma. What happens after the thing has happened? How do you get? What happens when you try to get to the other side of it? Like, what is that actual journey? I was much more interested in that than, here, let me re-traumatize you a little bit. Yeah, I find that more interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it also really interesting, like, the different family ties. Chosen family, Whitney and her best friend, the best friend and her boyfriend, the aunties and the housekeeper, like how they feel tied to the responsibility of looking after each other and looking after a young girl. And yeah, being women in that sense, I think that's also really, really pertinent.
Yeah.
What did you think about love and like the responsibility of love, like the weight of carrying somebody whilst you're going through this really big experience? Because she could be so unlikable and be very selfish
Yeah.
and be like,
And she is a little bit.
yeah, but also tries to reach out and tries to like relate to
Yeah.
other people and is like searching for like that kind of belonging.
Mm.
Yeah, how did you find like themes of like family and like love?
I think I wanted to, because I want, so without spoiling the book, obviously for those of you that haven't read it, Whitney was born in Ghana, and then she spent the first 4 years of her life there, and then she moved to London, and so as this original family unit that's very close, like you said, there are these women that are in her life that take care of her, and so I specifically left that in. I wanted to show, yes, there was responsibilities that weighed on her auntie Gloria, who ends up being the woman that raises her because her mother passes away, and she had her own wants and desires. But I also wanted to show that Whitney has a basis of love. So when we get to the point of her having a really bad experience with her ex-boyfriend and just feeling, having this sense memory of kind of something repressed, she's not this fully self-involved, selfish, I have no idea who I am person, because her beginnings are full of love. And I think that is sometimes, she could have been just had a horrible life in Ghana, just taken out of the situation, brought to London, and nothing was explained. And that is that's a lot of stories that I've heard, some of my personal experience. But actually, she had a basis for love, and so I think that feeds into her desire to be better and to be better to the people in her life, even when she fails at it. I'm not sure that's answered your question.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's incredibly beautiful. I think, yeah, I think generational trauma is maybe not the right word, but things that are passed down. Because yeah, I guess trauma is passed down, but so is love, and so are life lessons, and so is strength and resilience. And I think, yeah, sometimes people focus on like those very negative aspects, and think, yeah, the only thing that we learn in our bodies is trauma and anxiety, but it's also, yeah, strength and resilience. And is there anything else that you discovered in love that gave these characters resilience, or like gave them a reason to carry on? Like, what was the tools that they had in family? Like, what did it give them?
So there's a lot of music in the book, and there's this idea that Whitney's maternal grandmother would have been was very into music, and she kind of was always playing like soul music around the house and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how they grew up. She was very like godly, but she also loved soul and R&B, and so all the sisters kind of grow up with that. So there's something about, they have this house, they have this anchor and a place that is just for them, and that becomes, when that becomes haunted because of all the grief that they go through, then that's the time when Gloria takes Whitney and they leave for a better life in London, and so there's, and yeah, I'm not gonna ruin it though. So I was like, am I gonna read it by saying this? No. And there is another storyline of Gloria who has a kind of love story that doesn't come to fruition, let's say. There's something about, but instead of that being something that is necessarily like disappointing, is missing from her life, it just lives in a different place. It's something, it seems like it's unrealized, but actually the person that she loves is in her life, just not in the way that she would like. And so, again, I kind of just wanted to speak to you, okay, but there are other ways that we can, I don't know, connect and fulfill ourselves a bit. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's too complex.
Not
Yeah.
at all. I think that's amazing to say that it lives somewhere else, and I think that is really true. It makes me think about satisfaction and people that do migrate somewhere else. I think there's an idea like, oh, if you move to the UK, you should then be satisfied, and it's like so audacious to like ask for more. Like, yeah, you've reached this like good place. Like, why would you then be concerned about love and like, yeah, bringing your family over? Like, you know, it should be like, oh, you're focused on like surviving, but oh, how dare you like want any more?
Yeah.
And I wondered, like, did you think about what the characters were striving for and like whether you would give them that and how they would deal with getting it or not getting it, deal with satisfaction?
Yes, I did think about them getting what they want. Everybody doesn't get what they want. Spoiler. But they don't even get what they need. Yeah, I'm not even gonna pretend. That would have sounded really great, but it's not true. I did think about what they want though. Like that's, and that, to be fair, in the writing process, that's always something I think about. I like those character-driven narratives. I'm always thinking about what are their desires, because it helps me figure out where they want to go. And so that was like very top of my kind of mind. And so you'll see in the narrative, yeah, they get some degree of something. But yeah, life, as you say, life migrating wherever you go, whether you're in the UK, whether you go to the US, whether you go back home, whatever home is, that movement is that migration action is the thing that is going to change you, and I think that also changes what you want and what you desire. And so part of their journeys was about where they go. That will impact what do we think they want. What they wanted when they left and what they want when they get there are different.
And also like allow some space for growth. Like at the end, I was thinking, okay, where will they go next, and what will generations after be able to do? Like it reminds me of like reiteration and trying again. Like yeah, just I think the generational like narrative just reminded me like things are not over, and just because you don't get something the first time doesn't mean like it's totally like calamitous.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about writing in Twi and like going back to Ghana and putting your cultural heritage like in the book. You know, yeah, downstairs we were speaking about publishing to a majority white audience, and how did you think about explaining or not explaining Ghanaian culture and the different languages used? Yeah, who you are essentially when you are like a minority in the UK and the US where it's being published.
So because I was working on it for so long before it was like, it wasn't like anyone was, my agent was waiting for it. No one else was waiting for it. It wasn't like I had a specific audience that, oh, I have to remember. I wasn't really thinking, if I think about that, I won't write anything. But when it was eventually sold in the UK and in the US, they were, I think both publishers, for different reasons, have been really just like very open. There was no, I didn't have the experience of, oh, can you make this or over explain this? They might, and there were a couple of things they asked me to explain, and I was like, oh, no. Context clues, you don't need to, and they agreed, that kind of thing. So I didn't have to work too hard to do that. But I also think like I said, if I think about any audience, it won't be written. It got, and I have a West African publisher, and I'm most nervous about what the West African audiences are going to think than the people that I live with every day. because I didn't grow up in Ghana. I grew up in the UK. I grew up surrounded by Ghanaians, of course, and Ghanaian culture. But the tree in the book, my mum is the language checker for every single thing. So like I said, if it's wrong, it's her fault. No, but she checked, like she did, and she was really like meticulous. And this was the first time I ever let her get involved in anything that I'm writing before it's come out. And so I kind of sent it to her very tentatively. And like I said, we had this conversation and it just changed everything. And she was so meticulous and she was like, oh, we might say this, but we wouldn't say it like that. And she made it so natural, and she was just very like, she paid really close attention. She wanted it to be, she really believed in the narrative that I was trying to share. And I think because of the trip to Ghana and the way that everybody was, I really wanted to do it justice. And so she really helped me with that. So I feel confident about those bits, but I'm nervous still about what people are going to say about the Ghanaian parts of the book.
Yeah, I totally get that. Like, I think, yeah, again, like living in the diaspora, you want to be really careful, like, not to speak over like people on the continent.
Yeah.
And people forget, people in the UK, like other people that aren't a diaspora like child, forget that it is very specific to be a Black British person. That is different from being a British person, and it's different from being like a Black person somewhere else.
Yeah.
It sounds like a real like collaborative effort in the book, like a lot of voices coming through. Yes, I think it didn't give me like a homogenous view of what it means to be Black and British, even though it's very London centric.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the London parts of it and like representing like young adult life in London, like the fun, the making mistakes, like really silly mistakes, deciding between like love and friendship, romantic love. Yeah, how was that? Did it remind you of yourself when you were younger? Were you writing it for a specific person?
I was using none of my actual experience, but to be honest, like my experience in London. I grew up in London. Like it's my city. I can't write about London in London, ironically. So half of that book was in lockdown. So technically in the island of our flat. But I don't know. There's something about I have to be away from it to write about it. But it was So part of that was my experience. That was kind of those bits of like London and being out, and those were very easy, kind of to come to. And I think I just wanted to. I don't know. I want more London stories. Maybe that's why. Because even with my first book, Bad Love, there's a big section in it about poetry and like the spoken word scene in London at a very specific period in time, in like mid 2000. Anyway, and
please go on.
and that was like a really poignant time for me. So that's why that was in that book. But I think I just wanted to show like there's this thing about London, which, as you said, if you can just apply it to every place. It's just about mistakes and how old you are and what you do with your time there. I wanted all that to be kind of thrown in there. So there was also like it wasn't all grief and sadness as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw a bit of a curveball question. Sorry, we didn't discuss this downstairs.
I know
this isn't a pre-planned question. But I wanted to ask about spaces of like belonging, and cities and Black British life has changed so much. Like in the last 10 years, I don't know how old I'm assuming Whitney is. I'm imagining
she's 30.
Okay, yeah, she's 30. Yeah, so in the last like 10 years, what do you think? What would you like recommend, like prescribe for young adults to find spaces of belonging, like where they live in Britain?
That's a great question.
Such a couple.
Yeah, I mean it has changed, and I'm no longer a young adult, so
sorry. I do consider like anyone under the age of 45 to be a young adult.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, take it. No, you know what? I think I kind of, from what I see as well. Like I said, there was this. If you were like into like spoken word and poetry, there was a whole community like kind of available to you. That now, like a lot of those people are like kind of publishing books and like doing quite well, but they have their like community. I think it's such a good question. I don't know if there is one answer beyond just. I think a bit more bravery. I would say, like when I think about trying to making friends in any major city is difficult, but London especially is it's very cliquey. And so if you move there from somewhere else, it can be hard to kind of infiltrate like circles unless you join a club or something. But I think specifically like Black British young people who are so, like my sister, for example, she's 22. She's just like online, like that is a world that I don't understand. Not anymore. That she is just on it. Like that's how her and her friends communicate with like videos and like I don't know. But there are bits of friends that she'll hang out for this thing or friends that she'll talk to for this thing, and I think it's become quite bitty and it can be quite isolating. And I think sometimes it's kind of like feeling brave enough to go up to a person that you like and be like, I really like you, would you like to be friends? Which sounds really lame, but I think some of that is a bit lost. And I say that as somebody who moved to another country, moved to Australia. There's a friend over there, and I had to be brave. I forgot that. Oh God, I have to actually try to make friends. I don't know anyone, and I had to just put myself out there. And I feel like young people could really benefit from a bit more of that. That would be my advice. Maybe it's wrong.
No, I think bravery is always good. Like, I took a lot from the characters in the book, the way that they dealt with like repressed memories and recognized like a lot of like maladaptive techniques, like pushing on. And yeah, I think it's so specific to being a woman, like throwing yourself into work or throwing yourself into someone else's life to avoid.
Yes. The whole side of the room.
Yeah, like a big chorus of affirmation. Yeah, throwing yourself into fixing someone else's life so that you don't have to look at your own issues. And yeah, I wondered, like, I am going to draw on the psychotherapy. Like, do you have any advice for how do we deal with grief and when things like bad memories come up and hit you in the side of the face and like change how you reckon with yourself and recognize yourself? What is not a maladaptive response? What's an adaptive response to that?
I wish I could tell you there's one way to do that. That would be a lie. I always say, we always used to say when I was practicing that when you have a memory, when something traumatic or just something significant comes back into your memory that was probably repressed for a good reason, which is like to protect you. When it comes back, it's back probably because you are ready to process it. Even though it may not feel like that, but usually it comes back when everything is going well, not when everything is going really, really badly. It's usually when things are aligning and you're probably a bit mentally stronger.
We'll take it.
Writer, everybody. But you're more prepared, basically, to actually receive it and process it. And that processing is individual. I think a lot of it can come from, but a lot of the work comes in self-awareness as well, which is not an easy thing to grab if it doesn't come to you naturally. But I think one of the simplest ways to start is by thinking about what impact do you have on other people, which is how are my actions impacting this person when they're in a time of need. If you are in that process of like, oh, I'm trying to help this person, they're going through this, it's worth taking a step back to be like, oh, what bits am I helping and where am I maybe making it worse? And why would I be doing that? And kind of start, I think that helps to begin that self-reflection, but you need some self-reflection to be able to actually process that. If you're not yet ready, you're not in that place to face stuff, then you're just not going to face it. And you're going to learn the hard way how to face it. Sorry, that's not one answer.
No, that was a beautiful answer. And yeah, I'm going to sit with that one. That was a hard lesson, but it sounds like a true lesson to learn. Again, I thought that the lessons learned by the adults in the novel were very cyclical because it was across generations and like across different timelines. One thing that I really love that you brought out in the book was like self-acceptance and stillness. So you speak about this time after trauma or like after a really like significant event, like being there with the characters in that rather than like ending the book there or like dusting your hands and be like, it's okay because this magic silver bullet came and like saved everyone. And I think that's something that's not spoken a lot about when it comes to like people of color or like those type of characters. Like when it comes to understanding your identity and who you are, self-acceptance is not something that is like one of the pinnacles of the things that we speak about. So yeah, how did you approach that in the book? Why how important do you think is self-acceptance in navigating like adult life?
I think it's like so important, and that does go back to the therapy thing, which is a big part of the work was about getting people to that place of self acceptance where you are okay with who you are. I also think after our conversation downstairs, I'm also thinking about how probably we don't see that many narratives of that in the UK because that's not a very UK thing to do.
That's
We're not
so
really
true.
encouraged to be like accepting of ourselves or like overly confident about your, you know, your identity or about yourself, like at least not outwardly. And I think, and there are again, I feel like the younger generation, your generation, is really is actually doing like going the right direction with that. Like you're a lot more confident. And I wanted to. As I was thinking about you're going through this really difficult thing and there's lots of breakdowns for this character Whitney, but actually, like, yeah, what happens afterwards? And like, how does she get to a place of feeling, okay, this is who I am. These are all the things that have happened to me, and it's okay, and I'm okay, and I'm not resentful, and I'm not constantly yearning for some other version of myself. I'm just okay. That's a hard place to get to in real life, but it shouldn't be, you know. But that was really I like I said, I like a complex like narrative and like messy characters and stuff. But I also do always want that little line of hope, and I'm always disappointed when something like ends and it's like, and then everybody died, and I'm just like, what was the point? Like, what waste of my time? I wanted hope, like I want a little bit of hope, and I think so that I hope that some of that is in the book, that it felt hopeful rather than just a bit despairing.
It is a hopeful book. Yeah, it gave me hope. Like, okay, we got this. You get your arsenal ready for adult life. I know it wasn't about personal experiences, but I wondered if writing about Ghana and being black and British and things like this affected yourself, and if it taught you anything about you or like family ties and about love.
Yeah. It was a very big learning experience. Like I said, there was a conversation with my mother that was very big. There was lots of family stuff going. Also, we were in a pandemic, so also a lot of people, and that probably was actually infused it a little bit, the family saga of it, because I think a lot of us were. It divided a lot of families. Obviously, not just obviously losing their lives, but also in how people were approaching the virus and how understanding or empathetic people were in the same family and how difficult that was. I think a lot of people's eyes were open about, oh, I didn't realize this person I'm really close to kind of sees me in this way and not in the way that I thought. And I think there was a lot of challenges and bits that came through that. So I think all of that was also happening to me as well, and I think all of that was kind of infused in it. So what I found was actually then going. By the time I went to Ghana, I was still processing a lot of the stuff that had come up. I was processing like, what is this story that I'm trying to tell? Is it worth telling? And then going there was just like a kind of like, oh, like it was a challenge because I was still in a place I don't know, and I was kind of like, a deer in the headlights. But it was also really, but it was also really positive and really healing as well. And so maybe that's all sprinkled. Yeah,
Definitely. I think something that the next, if you were to have a child, and I'm thinking about the people in the book, something that the next generation do is like evolve past your mistakes and like the way that you made them.
Yeah.
So it becomes like a bit like a rhyme rather than like the exact same situation. And I'm wondering like, what does it take to evolve and to like challenge how things have happened in the past? And yeah, how do the characters do that? And like, yeah, does that like translate to real life?
I think Well, I think so. For Whitney, I think it's made like obvious early on that she's always had questions, but she is dealing with someone, her aunt, Ma Gloria, she calls her, who will not answer her questions about just anything that to do with Ghana. Not really. She's very just like elusive, or she just gets upset. And so Whitney's used to just not having questions answered and stopped asking. even though the hole just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so part of her, I guess, resilience, or part of the transformation for her, is trying to find the answers herself and deciding to not stop asking questions. And she pushes to a point that she does get an answer, and it's not anything that she expected, and it's quite devastating. But in doing that, there is something about a healing for my Gloria at the same time. And I think that is really reflective of your life, because I have lots of friends who also in the diaspora, in African diaspora, different diasporas, who's kind of just conversations that they couldn't have with their parents that they're now having, or elders that they're finding out about, especially people who are creative and they're like, oh, I'm doing this thing, I want to write a poem about it. And they're like, oh, well, I can tell you for that. You know, like you tricked them. No. But it's also like there's a framework almost. And actually, and I've said this before, and this isn't from me, this is from someone else, and I can't remember the name of the person that said it. So misquoting, but it essentially is this idea that if you are a person whose parents were somewhere else and they brought you to another country to have you or to raise you for a better life, the life that they imagine for you is always going to be different to the life that you have, just because they haven't lived that life. And that's true of every generation, even whether you've gone from one place to another, whatever the people that raised us want us to be, we're never going to be that, because we just live in a different time. So there's always going to be a bit of a gap that you are constantly trying to bridge. Sometimes it's not that big, but I think I put a very big gap in this book for obvious reasons, but the bridging the gap was for Whitney to understand herself more than anything else, and we as the readers get to see how the gap could be bridged on the other side, even if Whitney doesn't totally have all the answers herself.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that bravery thing that you mentioned, like for her aunt to open up to her and for her to ask those questions, even though she's been knocked back before, takes like a mutual vulnerability. And I think that's quite hard if you're used to being someone's caregiver and used to like caring for them. It's like you've got to collapse that authority a little bit. And yeah, why would you do that when it's such a safe place to play the role that you've always played? Did you think about like vulnerability when you're writing it, and like what it takes to be vulnerable as well? Like how do they come to trust each other to do that, to take that leap?
I think it was desperation. And again, I'm really trying not to give spoilers. The point at which that conversation happens is in a moment of desperation, which is kind of what pushes them to be vulnerable. And also that I think I want to kind of, there's also like other points of vulnerability in the book with the other characters. So Aretha is one of Whitney's aunts, and she ends up moving to Denmark. She kind of goes somewhere else for different reasons, and for kind of the same reason. And there is a vulnerability. There's something about her being able to be completely vulnerable when she leaves her home country that she is unable to do. And I think again, a lot of that is like, and again, that was also like I was nervous about my mum reading that. Because it was very like, it's very close to the bone, and it's stuff that we don't really talk about. And she was just very. It gave me hope about the minute bookshop, the power of literature, like because she was open to kind of like, I didn't think about it like that, and that was quite nice. That was like the highest compliment for me, that someone of that her generation, she could be like, I was like, I'll take that. Like, even if it opens up a little bit of vulnerability, then that's good.
I think that's amazing, and good that it also had that impact as well. I'm gonna open up to audience questions, but I have one last question before we do, and that's about friendship and like choice. It's one thing to be with the family and to be like, okay, we're related by blood, and like through geographical location, we've all experienced the same issues and stuff. But Whitney also has beautiful friendships and is also trying to understand like what that kind of love is like. Did you set out to really distinguish those two things? Like, how did you explore like friendship in the book?
I think, and that kind of speaks a little bit to your question about what young people, what are the new things or what are the other things they can do. I think our friendships are like so important, and I know many more people are talking about how important friendships are. I think if you grew up in a household like mine, you know, there's the kind of this idea of like, oh, your little friends. You know, like they're not that important. And actually, of course they are. All of our people have people. I think chosen family, whether it's chosen family, just close friends are really, for Whitney, they are the thing that holds her up. There would have been, she wouldn't have been able to go very far in her journey without them. And I wanted to show these different types of people, as in, you know, she has a friend who, if she wanted to, her friend would just protect her from everything she didn't want to see, if she wanted to. And then she has a friend who doesn't care about that, and will just be like, face the thing. And she has both sides of it, and she kind of goes back and forth. And I just wanted to show that our friends are really a good reflection of ourselves. Like I said again, how we impact each other says a lot about who we are as people, and how people interact with us says a lot about who we are. And I think the fact that these two friends continue to go back to Whitney, even when she kind of makes mistakes and she's a bit self-involved and she doesn't really pay attention to things when she needs to be because she's going through all of this stuff, I think is also, it gives her a message of like, oh, I'm worth paying attention to. And I think a really good friendship does that.
That's beautiful. And I totally agree. Okay. Are there any audience questions or questions online for us? Yeah?
Yeah, so there's a question from online just asking, how was the experience of writing your second book? How was it different from your first, and also whether you see the two related in any way? Obviously there's the London element.
Okay, I shall repeat the question. Yeah, so what was my experience of writing this book, the second one? How was it different to the first one, and are they related? Yeah. Yeah, so well, completely different universes now. They both happen in London, but they are completely different books. The first one was just about, so the first one's called Bad Love, and it was very coming of age, and it was much more about romantic relationships and this main character, Kriya's relationship with her parents, and her kind of modelling or trying not to model her relationships on their relationship because she didn't like it, and of course that doesn't work. So, and we kind of follow her as she figures out herself through these relationships with other people. That was so fun to write. I was there. Oh, it just flowed. Nobody was waiting for it. No one cared. I was just like, oh la la la. I was writing it for myself, and by the time, but I worked on it for so long. By the time it was ready, it was just ready. And it's like a joyful book. It's like silly, and it's got situationships in it, and it's like fun. This book wasn't like that. And I was like, you know, when you start something and you're like, well, why have I done this? It was just like, it was a lot. I did a lot of research trying to figure out what I was trying to write about, and the character of Whitney came very quickly, but it was what was happening was like that took some time. And I tell you that the benefit of being able to write a second book is you can do it because you've already done the first one. So you're like, oh, I can write a novel because you've done it. Whether that novel was good or bad is not. That's not the point. It's just that you can do it. So I was less afraid of it being a novel by that point. And I always say, the first book, if I had thought it was going to be a novel, I wouldn't have written it because I just thought, oh, I'm going to write this story about this girl, and then it just carried on. Whereas this was like, I'm going to write a book. And so this was much more purposeful and intentional, and it feels a lot more personal, even though it's not really about me at all. It's about my generation's experience to some extent. So it's just very different, but it's exciting, and I am really, really happy with it, and I'm excited to hear what people think. And whether, as I always say, although I'm saying this, but I do care, but I do say, once the book is out, it doesn't belong to me anymore. So whether people like it or they don't like it, or I mean, I can't change it because it's already written. But also, it doesn't belong to me anymore. It's whatever people take from it now.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the audience? Any
gotcha question.
Gotcha.
This is not a gotcha question.
Okay.
Obviously, there's like an amazing, huge canon of London literature that stretches back like really long way. Are there any books
Oh, okay.
Or
So
that expecting you while you were writing?
ooh, that's a great question. Any books that feature London or that spoke to me that I would recommend? So what was I reading? You know what? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but obviously for the first like year of the pandemic, I couldn't read anything. There was no reading. Yeah, it's a nod again. But when I did start reading, I think I started reading poetry, which I really love. I'm very bad at writing, but I'm good at reading, and so there were a few London-based poets that I really like. That really quite a few actually. So there's Yomi Shoday's Mannerism, which it's like one of the best poetry collections I've read. It's about kind of black masculinity, and it's also just about culture and diaspora and gaps as well. There's big things in there that are very similar and that were very inspiring. There is Quiet by Victoria Duco Bully, like really beautiful collection. Again about like black womanhood and motherhood and just finding your way through the world. So there was a lot of that. I was reading a lot of like kind of searching kind of things that were some were about London, but some were just about they could have been anywhere. Yeah. Um, those would be my two recommendations. Otherwise, I'll go on forever.
Good recommendations. All right. Any other questions? Did I see a question over here? Yes.
One question. In Netflix calls, who's gonna play Whitney and Gloria?
This is
That's
such a
huge,
question.
isn't it?
So the question was, if Netflix calls, who's going to play Whitney and Gloria?
If you can't
If
pick both, pick one.
Oh God, I'm so bad with names. I can just like describe faces to you. That's not helpful. Okay, an older woman to play Gloria would probably be like a. Right now, all that's going into my mind is like African American actresses. That's not helpful.
London
Although
will
if they
crucify
can
you.
do the accent, it's fine. London will. That's correct. I'm trying to think of. You know what? Oh, actually, okay. Well, she does. She did a Jamaican accent, but I don't know if she is Jamaican. So maybe she's not. Maybe she could do a Ghanaian accent. It doesn't matter. It's not real. But the actress from. Do you remember that show, Desmond's? The barber shop. Yes, the wife. Yes, Shirley, you would remember her name. I can't remember the name of the actress, but somebody like her, I think, would be a really great. She was just like like somebody who's like very, like in her, when she was a younger woman, she was very like sought after and like kind of like would give people the time of day, but was like knew who she was. Like that's Gloria. That's like and that person that then when you're the child, you don't think about them that way. You think their life didn't exist before you existed. So what do you mean? And they might say things like, "Oh, you didn't need me when I was young," that kind of person. That's what I think of. And if Whitney, I would say a younger either Susan Wokoma, just slightly younger, although maybe not though. But yeah, I think her because I would like to see her in a more serious, like, I kind of have. Like, I think she's really like versatile, but I also think there's like a joyfulness to her that I think would be really good. Those are my random
So good. Yeah.
on the spot.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it now. And did you have a question over here? Yeah, please go on.
Well, I wanted to ask about your experience and that influencing your decision to pursue psychotherapy. Did that play any role? And how do you view the psychotherapy community when it comes to cultural awareness and inclusion as an awareness?
That's a great question. So the question was my experience and what influenced my decision to go into psychotherapy, and then how do I view kind of their interaction with culture and identity. Okay. Great question. Well, we don't have that long. No, I was always interested in people. I didn't go to university and do creative writing or anything. Like I wanted to, and I'm pretty sure it was my grandmother who said to me, "You're not gonna make any money from that." So she was right. But I was always interested in people, so I got into psychology, instead, and I was really interested in that. And then I ended up doing that at university, and then I kind of knew I wanted to go into some kind of therapeutic place, and I think kind of part of that kind of connects to what we talked about in that the responsibilities of women. I'm an older sibling, the oldest sibling, the oldest sibling there ever was, and I was very used to looking after people, and like I went to church, and that was also a big part of it. Like you're always in service to other people, and my grandmother was very like that, and so that kind of did sit under the this is a tick thing to do. I also was really interested in it, but that was a big part of it. I would say is really being used to being in service to other people. And it was only then when I got into it that I felt like, oh, actually, this is something else entirely, and it does feel a bit like a calling, and you have to really be committed to doing that. And I really did love it. But when I was training, there wasn't really an awareness or conversation. This wasn't even that long ago. It wasn't even that. This was like 2012. There wasn't really that conversation about cultural awareness. There were like groups that were specifically making sure they had that in their practice and thinking about that, but in training that wasn't part of it. It's only now, like in recent years, there are lots more things that have modules where it's like, oh, cultural awareness, and aware of somebody has a different cultural background to you. The way I was taught was very much like we're just humans interacting with each other, and it's just on that basis level, which for like 75% of it that can work, but obviously there's nuances that you just aren't going to get, and you need to like be aware of. So anyway, that was a big part of the training that I had, and actually when I decided to take a break after I'd been doing it for a while, and I encourage you to, because I was working with trauma clients, and I took a break and I just kept writing, and so I never went back because of that. Not because I had some horrible experience or anything like that. I loved it. I really thought I was going to go back, and then the writing said no. And actually, and I always say, like, I wouldn't be the kind of writer I am today without that, just because the way I think about people is heavily influenced by my experience in that realm.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Is there like a final question, or are we satiated? Are we satisfied?
Yeah. I'll ask a very simple question just to finish off. You had a career before as a psychotherapist. Was there any time something that made you decide to go into writing, or was it something that was always kind of in the back of your mind? Was there an epiphany moment, or did it just kind of come to you one day?
So the question was, I had a career as a psychotherapist before. What was there anything that inspired me to go back to writing? Or get it restarted? Yes, it was always something I was doing. I was always like writing stories for my friends in like the playground and putting them in the stories. You know, people love that. And I was so I was always writing. Like even when I was training, just there's like doodles of just like poetry around my like workbooks when I should have been paying attention. I was a good psychotherapist, I promise. And so it really was like as soon as I took it, I was just taking like a break that everybody takes after a certain point, and I was just writing. Suddenly it was just like the writing was coming. I think I was blogging, and I felt like I had a voice a bit more than I had felt before, and so it was mostly that. Like, but also I think it was the work. I think it was being in you're in a very privileged position to sit with someone else at their most vulnerable, and your job is to make sure that they feel held and they feel safe, and they can get to the other side of whatever the rest of their day is going to be, like without kind of falling apart, and also whilst also trying to take care of yourself as a person, and all of that is really those intricacies and other things that really sit in my character building, I think. So I'm very grateful for it.
Thank you. That was a brilliant question to end on. Okay, I want to say thank you so much, Mame, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you're just going to head over to the next room and
Yeah.
do some signings if
Yeah.
anybody wants to pick up the book or just ask any other questions. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan.